Caswell Bay, South Wales. A quiet stretch of coastline where the sea meets the cliffs without much sound. People come here to walk, to forget, to disappear for a while. In 1961, 3 young potholers made their way into an old, forgotten lead mine near Brandy Cove, just west of the bay. It was the kind of place only a certain kind of person visits. Dark, damp, and hollow. The air inside was stale, unmoved for decades. They pushed deeper into the mine, headlamps cutting through pitch black. That's when they found it. A slab of rock wedged into the wall unnaturally. Behind it, something wrong. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't debris. It was a skeleton, human, hidden, dismembered, left there to be forgotten. Police were called. The scene was sealed. The slab was removed, and the bones were carefully pulled out, one by one. At the Home Office Forensic Science Laboratory in Cardiff, Dr. Lester James and forensic scientist Brian Morgan began their work. What they found was disturbing, not because of what it was, but how it was done. The skeleton was almost complete, but it had been sawn into 3 pieces. The cuts weren't clean. The killer had struggled. There were deep saw marks across the thighs, upper arms, shoulder blades. In some places, the saw had skidded, leaving thin, ragged scratches along the bone. Multiple failed attempts. Hesitation. Panic. Whoever did this was trying to take a body apart, but didn't know how, and didn't have time to figure it out. Alongside the bones were remnants. Bits of sacking, a brass chain, a celluloid hair clasp, still holding strands of brown hair, long dead, but real. Jewelry, worn thin with time. Green stains across the bones, from copper corrosion. Everything pointed to a woman, but no name, no face, no story. Was this a recent murder, or something older, an unsolved mystery lost to time? No answers, not yet. But something about the way she was hidden behind that rock, tucked away like garbage, made it clear. Someone wanted her gone, forgotten. And for over 40 years, she was. At first glance, the skeleton was anonymous. But the closer they looked, the more it began to speak. Dr. James examined the pelvis and skull. The configuration was unmistakably female. She had likely stood about 5 feet 4 inches. Slim. Young. They measured the growth lines in her bones. Growth plates at the ends of the limbs had only recently fused. X-rays showed 3 wisdom teeth, partially developed. The base of the skull had only just joined. These were signs of someone in her mid-20s, no older than 28. She wasn't ancient. She wasn't an archaeological curiosity. She had died as a young adult, fully grown, but just barely. Clothing remnants were still clinging to what was left. Molded fabric and traces of sacking. The green stains on the bones were from brass jewelry. Time had stripped away her identity, but not completely. Among the fragments, a brass chain about 7 inches long. A hair clasp holding dark brown strands. The hair hadn't been dyed or treated. A pair of rings, wedding and engagement, each with hallmarks dated between 1912 and 1918. And gilt copper tassels, once attached to a stole. The costume department at the National Museum of Wales confirmed. Fashionable around 1920. These weren't just items, they were timestamps. Her jewelry placed her in the early 20th century. Her physical condition matched it. Her presence in that mine was not new. It had been decades. A woman in her 20s, dead for over 40 years, cut apart, buried behind a rock in an abandoned mine. No missing persons report, no name, nothing. But someone, somewhere, had to have known her. And someone had to have wanted her erased. The police knew one thing. The woman had likely died sometime after World War I. But finding anyone who remembered her, let alone cared, wouldn't be easy. Decades had passed. Records were gone, most of them destroyed during World War II bombings over Swansea. Police files, court documents, local archives, all of it gone in fire. Still, whispers remained. A name came up again and again, spoken like something half-remembered. Mamie Stuart. People recalled a dancer, a chorus girl, young, charming. She vanished around 1919 or 1920, and no one ever found out why. The newspapers from the time hadn't been destroyed, and they told a story. Mamie Stuart had been born in Sunderland. She was 26 when she disappeared. She had been involved with a man named George Shotton, a marine engineer who traveled from port to port. In 1918, Mamie and Shotton went through a form of marriage in South Shields. But it wasn't legal, because Shotton already had a wife and child, living quietly in Penarth, near Cardiff. Mamie didn't know, or maybe she did. Either way, she stayed. The couple moved constantly: Bristol, South Wales, Swansea. Eventually, they settled in a small village called Tylunwyd. The last confirmed contact was December 12th, 1919. Mamie sent a postcard to her parents. They replied, but their letter was returned, house closed. Confused, they sent a telegram. It too came back, undelivered. Then, days before Christmas, another telegram arrived, supposedly from Mamie, wishing them holiday greetings. It didn't feel right. The words weren't hers. But the family let it go. It was the last time anyone ever heard from Mamie Stuart. She had vanished. No farewell, no trace, just gone. And now, decades later, there was a body in a mine. Same height, same age, same era. Not proof, but a trail. George Shotton was a man who knew how to disappear, without ever leaving town. He kept two lives running side by side, one with his real wife and child in Penarth, the other with Mamie Stuart, the woman he married in secret. He was quiet, polite, mild even. But people who knew him remembered something else: jealousy, control, and a temper that flickered just beneath the surface. When Mamie vanished, Shotton had an answer for everything. Yes, they lived together. No, they weren't married. They'd argued. She left. He moved on. To the police, it sounded convenient. Then, 3 months after she disappeared, a suitcase turned up at the Grosvenor Hotel in Swansea. Unclaimed, left for weeks. It didn't belong to any current guest. Inside was another, smaller case. Inside that, 2 shredded dresses, a pair of cut-up shoes, a Bible, manicure set, and jewelry. At the bottom, a torn scrap of paper. It had the address of Mamie's parents in Sunderland. They confirmed it. These were her things. Around the same time, a cleaning woman preparing the Tylunwyd house for new tenants found something else. A brown leather handbag, moldy and forgotten, stuffed behind a washstand. Inside, loose change, and a ration card, still legible. It was issued to Mamie Stuart. Scotland Yard sent Chief Inspector William Draper to investigate. His first move was simple: find George Shotton. He wasn't hiding. He was living quietly at Caswell Bay, just a few miles from the house where Mamie had last been seen. Still with his original wife. Still going about his life, like nothing had happened. The evidence was mounting. The suitcase, the handbag, the silence, but none of it proved murder. And without a body, there was no case. The skeleton in the mine had no voice. But some things don't stay buried forever. At the 1961 inquest, the courtroom wasn't filled with speculation or theory. It was filled with her, laid out on a table in the well of the court, bone by bone. No face, no skin, just what was left after 40 years in the dark. And then, there was the postman. He was 83 now, retired, but still remembered his old route through Swansea. And he remembered George Shotton. One morning, long ago, He saw Shotton struggling outside his house with a bulky sack. It looked heavy, like it wasn't meant to be carried by one person. The postman offered to help. Shotton jumped. No, no, no. Oh God, you gave me a fright. I thought it was a policeman. At the time, it was strange, but not enough to mean anything. Now, decades later, it sounded different. When the skeleton was discovered in Brandy Cove, rotted sacking was found alongside the remains. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe not. The forensic team kept digging. No soft tissue meant no cause of death. No blunt force trauma. No clear signs of violence. But also no evidence she hadn't been murdered. Strangulation, stabbing, or even a gunshot. All possible. Just invisible now. Still, the circumstantial evidence started to speak, and it spoke with clarity. The hair clasp matched her hair. The brass chain matched one Mamie's sister said she always wore. Her age, height, and estimated time of death lined up exactly. There were no dental records, but one detail lingered. Mamie reportedly had a false front tooth. Several teeth were missing from the skull, but it wasn't clear why. They may have simply dislodged post-mortem, or during the decades she spent underground. Then came the final test, a photo-fit experiment. Police had one photograph of Mamie Stuart from 1920. They took a transparency of the skull, positioned it to match the original photo, and superimposed the two. It wasn't perfect, but it was close enough. The eyes, jawline, and structure matched. It wasn't proof, but it was something more powerful than theory. It was recognition. On December 14, 1961, an inquest was held in Gower. The jury sat in silence, facing what remained of Mamie Stuart. No theatrics, no grand reveal, just bones laid bare, a life reduced to evidence. The testimony was familiar, some of it pulled from decades past. The suitcase, the handbag, the shredded clothes, the postman's memory of a sack, and a man too afraid of being seen. Then the verdict came. Murder. And the killer was named George Shotton. But justice never came, because Shotton was already dead. In 1958, 3 years before the skeleton was found, he died of natural causes in Bristol's Honiton Road Cemetery at the age of 78. No trial, no punishment, just a name on a gravestone. For over 40 years, he had lived free, while Mamie remained hidden in the dark, cut apart, forgotten, buried behind a rock in a mine no one visited. The story might have ended there, quietly, with a coroner's ruling and a press headline or two. But it didn't, because some stories don't stay buried. The chorus girl mystery still lingers, more than a century after Mamie disappeared, not just because of the crime, but because of the silence that followed. She was erased, and for a long time, that almost worked. But someone remembered, and someone found her.